Okay, and I remember that when you guys were first, you've been fans of a lot of franchises. Well, not a lot, but very specific ones. Tell me about you. You guys were into Sonic the Hedgehog for a while.
Yeah, we got into Sonic the Hedgehog when we were kids, partly through playing, it was mostly through playing a PC port of the original Genesis games.
Uh-huh.
And then also some of the later video games and watching some of the cartoons.
Right.
So we also picked up on reading the comic, and we were into that for quite a while.
Does the comic have dynamics like, interpersonal dynamics with the characters the same as Marvel stuff, or, I'm just wondering if any of that kind of dynamic is impacted in Power Squared. Because Sonic had its own universe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there were definitely certain dynamics that were consistent throughout different versions of Sonic the Hedgehog. The most consistent was kind of the friendship between Sonic and Tails.
Right.
Like, Tails is always depicted as always younger in some sense than Sonic is. But they both have this deep friendship that's like hard to break.
Right.
And then in the more recent Sonic Boom cartoon, which we enjoy a lot, the comic was good too, and it lasted. Yeah, the comic was really good too. But there's with Sonic Boom, there's a relationship between the friendship between Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and Styx. And they're it's kind of like, I guess you could say, how real people would be as friends. Like, they
interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, they disagree a lot on a lot of things, and they have all these different personalities, but when they need to, they can really work together to overcome different challenges. Right.
We were talking about the way that, and I was talking with David about this, the way that there's a coming of age story wrapped up in this sci-fi superhero story.
Yeah.
And that there's got to be parallels to Marvel's Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, for sure. We're still big fans of the Sam Raimi movies,
right?
Especially Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, everybody. No, I don't know anybody that embraces number 3. Do you?
No. I don't but 1 and 2 are definitely coming of age stories.
Definitely peaked with 2, I gotta say.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And 2 was also complex because it had Peter wrestling with his identities as a college student, trying to get through like the real world, and then also his superhero persona as Spider-Man.
Right. And that's I see that as a direct correlation. I get a lot of that from the Times Square stories, the plot lines, where you would get so wrapped up in the interpersonal story. Is Eli going to talk to that girl? Is he going to, and that was kind of how it was with Spider-Man too. Is he going to pass his exam? Is he going to ask out Betty Brant or Gwen Stacy? That got as entertaining and as engrossing as him fighting the Vulture or Electro or somebody like that. So I'm feeling the same kind of vibe in that one. I guess we got to credit Stan Lee for breaking ground in that regard. The first basically teenage superhero that apparently his uncle didn't want him to do, but he did it anyway. But, and turned out there was gold in them Nar Hills. However, I don't think, to my knowledge, there has ever been one where it was identical twins. And that's got to be and that's got to be one of the really unique things about the book as well. Are there any characters in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure besides the the battles and the way superpowers are expressed. Are there interpersonal dynamics in JoJo that resonate in Times Squared?
Power Squared.
Power Squared? I'm sorry. I worked on a book called Times Squared years ago. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to think about that.
Yeah. Or let's jump off for that for a second. I was we were talking before, Trevor, about some storyline possibilities, things that you had kind of addressed, some ideas you were kicking around.
Yeah, we had this idea for future storyline.
Future story arc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it was two yokai fights going on at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So that would sort of what also makes that interesting is that like Marty and Eli are sort of away from each other while they're each fighting a yokai, and so so that sort of puts to the test the fact that they have to share these abilities that they have.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. I could see how that would play into it. You know, it's interesting. I look forward to seeing the day when you guys are at a convention, because I remember, I don't know if you guys, you're probably not old enough to remember, back in the 80s there was a independent comic called Mage, done by a creator named Matt Wagner, who's still working in comics. And he had his own little universe, and when he came for the signing, it was like Matt Wagner was Mage, you know? I mean, maybe a little more heavy set than the guy. But he had all the other characters, and they were, you know, I mean, they didn't really wear costumes, but they had a certain way of, you know, like the Mage guy would always wear a black t-shirt, and his other friend always wore like a white trench coat type of thing. So they were all standing behind the, you know, and I said, oh, those are his friends, those are the guys. So in that way, Power Squared reminds me of that, how there are real-life counterparts, you know, to the characters in the storyline.
Oh, I thought of an answer for the JoJo's.
Yeah, go for it.
The interpersonal stuff.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think what might contribute to that is the fact that JoJo's is a multi-generational series.
Right.
And the different JoJo's have different dynamics during each time period. What's interesting about even part 1, Phantom Blood, Jonathan and Dio Brando is Jonathan Joestar's adoptive brother.
Uh-huh.
So while Jonathan has to fight Dio, he's also at least wrestling with the fact that he's sort of fighting his own brother.
Oh, right.
And so then Dio also gains, even though Dio is trying to kill Jonathan, he also has respect for him at the same time.
Right.
And then with part 2, we see Joseph Joestar's story, and his relationship with characters who have even survived from part 1, like Speedwagon.
Right.
And I think you could especially see some interpersonal stuff in part 3, Stardust Crusaders, because you get the relationship between Jotaro and his grandfather Joseph.
Yes.
And so Joseph kind of acts as a guide for Jotaro.
Uh-huh.
However, he is also sort of getting to know Jotaro in a way.
Right, right. The interesting dynamic. Here's just an interesting observation I made. You guys are the only identical twins I've ever worked with for any length of time. But I've worked with brothers many times. Now, when you talked about the story, you talked about the storyline in JoJo where these brothers are trying to knock each other off. That is consistent with what I've seen. There's a lot of sibling rivalry with brothers that are not identical twins.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, I've broken up fist fights, and I've been coaching. I've coached bands where the guys are brothers, and of course, your dad can tell you that the famous band from the '60s, the Kinks, they used to have on-stage fights. The two brothers, Ray Davies and Dave Davies, you know, and it's too. I used to think, God, it's too bad if they could just work this out. They could make like more platinum records and, you know, get more tours and everything, but. It seems like the world of identical twins, and I know there have been documentaries about it, but they seem to get along better. Have you guys ever had, you know, speaking of conflict, have you guys ever had like a real fight? I mean, I'm not talking about just like shoving and stuff when you're a kid, but a real thing where it lasts a week or a couple days? Has it ever occurred?
I think so. Well, we definitely got into fist fights when we were younger.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's natural. That's natural when boys do. I probably should have addressed this question, and this just occurred to me now, but when we were talking about the enviable superpowers that the boys have in Power Squared, if you had one of the powers, would you keep it a secret?
I guess it would depend on how well I could use it for good. If there was a lot of potential to do good with it, then maybe I wouldn't be secretive of it.
Yeah.
But if it's kind of gray, then maybe I just keep it to myself.
That's interesting. What about you, Trevor? Would you tell or would you keep it a secret?
I guess that would kind of depend.
Yeah. Something like the time lapse thing. I mean the time travel thing.
Yeah.
That might be so dangerous you would have to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Then again, just think of the annoying friends that would hit you up for favors. Yeah, aside from that though, you know, when we talk about like the telekinesis, I mean, you could get away with that. People would think it might be a parlor trick, right?
Yeah.
But boy, the time-lapse stuff, yeah, here's the weird thing. The time-lapse is subjective, though, right? I mean, the people around don't know that they've just repeated something. Only the time traveler, in this case, that would be you, or that would be Marty. Marty knows that he's gone back in time, right? But everybody around him doesn't know, hey, we just did this before. Nobody there has deja vu, do they?
No.
Yeah, right. So actually, that would be a hard one to prove. There's ways you could do it, but here's the thing. In Times Square, it makes... Sorry, I did it again. In Power Squared, it makes sense that they're keeping it a secret, since the agenda, you know, of the book with Dr. Atlas and all these people,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of got that X-Men thing where they're being pursued.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Also, and this is a funny thing you guys probably won't relate to, but a lot of the AIP teenage monster movies in the in the late 50s, the bad guys were always adults. Like I was a teenage werewolf. Michael Landon's turned into a werewolf. It's a medical experiment done by his chemistry teacher, right? And it kind of feeds into the distrust of the adult world, you know. Oh, that's another question I wanted to ask. Are they going to stay the same age, or are they going to get older as the book gets older, as time passes?
Hadn't really considered that. Currently, we have it where they're the same age throughout.
Right, right. And what's the median age, or is that specified?
They're I think they're basically in their early 20s.
Yeah. So that's great. We just keep it like kind of early 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we going to see, so when they turn 21, are we going to see Marty and Eli going to strip clubs and bars?
I don't know about that.
Maybe a one shot. Guys, thanks for sitting. It's been a great interview. We look forward to future issues of Power Squared.